Cathy here from Eclectic Images. Now in today's tutorial we're working with the Rosebud stamp set again, the Eclectic Images Rosebud set. Today though I'm going to use the Wispy outline and team it with some shimmer dust to create a bit of a smushy background. But not as smushy as I usually do. I'm going to be a bit more restrained with this one. I'll show you the stamps that we're going to use. So we've got our Rosebud set, but this is the outline we're using today. So this very loose one, rather than the more defined one that I've been working with. And this one doesn't match up exactly with our shadow stamps and things, but we're still going to use the shadow one. The other stamps I'm going to use to create a little bit of a collage around it is the mandala border and the mandala dreamcatcher, but just the gems out of that. So it's going to be a little bit of fun here. Right, so to start with, what else we're using, Matthew? We're using some black embossing powder and yes, our shimmer dusts. So these are by Beati here in Australia, and the shimmer dusts are a pigment powder with a little bit of shine. I normally transfer them, to be able to sprinkle them, I normally transfer them to a little pot with a pin in the top so I can just tap out a little bit at a time. But from the pots that they come in, you can put some into a palette for painting with, you can put them into your shaker pots, and they're really cool colours. Very, very vibrant. Our inks today, fairly limited, just a little bit of VersaFine Clair Morning Mist for our first soft flower, and then we'll have some VersaFine Clair Nocturne for our collage elements, and we'll come back in at the end with some Versamark and the black embossing powder and really make that rose pop out. So my first thing has been just to arrange my rose on my piece of card. I've lined my card up with a grid point there in my platform, and I'm just going to lay the mandala border over the top and just make sure that I've got a reasonable amount showing above and below the rose, and I'm happy with that. So that means I'm happy with that position. So I'm going to pick it up. I'm just looking that I've got it fairly even on the card. Let's just shift it over that way a bit. Okay, let's pick it up. Now, my first inking for it is just going to be a rough guide. So that's why I'm just going to use the VersaFine Clair Grey, the Morning Mist. So it's just so that I can actually see where I'm placing the other stamps. So I'm actually going to come in with my cloth and just make sure that I haven't put it on the whole stamp, because it's just a guide. Let's stamp that down. Okay, give me a bit of a clean, because the next ink on that will be Versamark, and of course I don't want VersaFine Clair all over my Versamark pad. So we'll come back to him later. So now I've made a mask of this image. Now, because it's such a sketchy look, your mask is going to be a little bit random. That way I can now line up the mandala border, making sure that I'm fitting the top and the bottom on the card, and making sure there's not little bits of hair on it that's going to interfere with the design. So lining it up, and also checking that I've got it fairly straight on the page. So I may have to shift my mask. Well, in fact, I'll be able to move the mask once I've got this onto this layer of the press. So let's have a look with our stamp press and just look at our grid lines and see that we're pretty well lined up. We've got our baubles a bit off that centre line all the way down. So I think that's pretty good. Let's pick that up, and of course it's taken the mask with it. So let's just peel that off gently, pop the mask back in place. So this way our design of our mandala border will go behind where we want to do the blossom of the flower. So let's ink up with our Nocturne ink pad. Not having to ink the very centre of it, because that'll be in the middle of the mask, but making sure I'm getting plenty of ink on both ends. Let's press down. Now we're using VersaFine Clair, which is a pigment ink, so let's make sure we give it time to absorb into that card, and making sure that we're putting pressure right to the top and bottom of the stamp. Lift up, make sure we're happy with our design, Yep, I'm happy with that. So now we'll hang on to our mask, and I'm going to clean that stamp and take it out of there. And then we're actually going to take our card out of the precision press and work just on some paper for the next stage. Let's just pop you to one side. Okay, so now working on our, just a paper pad. We'll pop our mask back in place, and again using our Nocturne ink, I'm going to ink up the gems from this Dreamcatcher mandala. So the Dreamcatcher mandala is made with all the bits separate, so you can mix and match them with other stamps. So you can stamp it completely as a Dreamcatcher with the beautiful gems. You can add the extra gems into it anywhere, but we can also use those with some of our other stamps, and that's what we're doing here. But of course, it's way too wide for that Rosebud. So what I'm wanting to do is just use some little bits of it. So that means looking at this side, I'm going to ink up just this side of the stamp. Position it so I can see that some of those beads look like they're coming off the rose petals. Don't breathe too heavy on your mask and push it out of line. That's not such a good idea. So yes, positioning our beads so that they make sense with the design. Stamp down. Now I need to clean this thoroughly because I don't want any of this getting on the card as we're stamping the other side. So let's make sure we give it a really good clean, both on our just damp sponge, but then also onto my cloth that I have on usually on my lap, but I'll bring it up here now so I can make sure I give that a really good wipe. Make sure we've got that really clean. Good. Okay, now same process, but to the other side. So again, the mask in place. So you can see how that looks like those beads are coming off the rose petals. That's the look we're wanting to get. So this time, and again, it's worth just putting your stamp over where you're going to stamp it and having a look before you ink it up. So I'm looking at this side. I don't really need that long dropper this time because we've got one of those in there. Two is going to make it just too busy. So I'm actually just going to ink just the very first dropper and that lot of beads. So you work that out by having a look at your stamp and how it's going to position. So now we make sure that mask is in place. So it's really crazy because it looks like using such a little bit of the stamp, but it's really, really effective. Making sure the droppers are coming off the petals and the beads are going quite straight. Okay, so it looks a little bit crazy at the moment, but once we emboss the flower in the middle, that's going to bring that back out again. So it just shows how you can actually use part of your stamps to build out a collage effect. And how sometimes a stamp that's got several pieces to it can be used with multiple stamps. Okay, now we don't need that one at the moment. So let's now get our shimmer dusts in here. I'll give this a little bit of a dry with our heat gun. Versify and Clear doesn't need to be heat set, but I do want it to be dry because we're going to be spritzing water around and I don't want any smudging. It's probably already dry, but I'm just making sure. Okay, now I'm going to try and be very subtle with my background colouring. And I don't mind if I get some on the flower because we're going to be putting more on the flower in a short time. So let's just grab our lollipop colour, our pink, and just tap some of that around.
Lollipop doesn't sound very subtle.
No, the colours aren't very subtle, so I'm just trying to use not too much of them, and I'll try and use not too much water with them, and see if I can get, normally I get a very smushy background when I'm using shimmer dust, but this time I really want it to be more dotty. So I'll put a bit of orange up into the pink area, more orange up the top. Now this is amber. Nope, that's enough, stop. Okay, so with my spritzer, I will very carefully spritz underneath the card a bit, which will stop it doing too much curling. And then just gently spritz until I've got dottiness rather than a whole lot of smush. Often I put on quite a bit of water and quite a bit of colour, and I'll use air to blow it around to get smushiness. But this time I'm just looking for more subtle. And I think that is enough. So yes, quite, if you've seen me work with shimmer dust before, this is quite restrained. We will give it a little bit of a dry before I do the next layer. So the next layer is going to be using the solid stamp, but also with the shimmer dusts. So that's going to create a smushy colour for here. And as I said, the solid stamp does not line up exactly with this outline. And that's part of the point of it. It's about creating a relaxed, wispy look. It's not about precision. Precision is the detailed outline where we layer things carefully. This is way more relaxed. Just make sure that's all beautiful and fairly dry. Cool. Now we will grab our solid stamp. So its widest point is that bottom bit there. So let's sprinkle on some of our colours. I'll have some of the amber. And then some of the lollipop. So I'm letting the colours, I'm putting them in definite areas, but then I'm letting there be some overlap. So we've got some of each colour going into the other colour's area, which will help to blend them. Now, and I want to wet the card to help this smush, and if we get a bit of bleeding, that's fine, but I don't want to over wet these areas. So I'm just going to give it a very little spray, and now we'll spray our actual stamp. And you'll see those colours start to move and smush already. Is it exciting? Now we've got to be able to tip it upside down. No, I'm going to go more water than that. Let's make it very, oh, look at those colours. Okay, so we're ready to smush. Flip it over, pop it down and just smush. And then we'll just pick it up. Now it will pool in one area, that's fine, because we'll come in with a bit of paper towel and just knock that back a little bit. Just gentle dabs, you don't want to take too much colour off. But see how gorgeous that has given us the background colour for the flower without any trouble colouring it. It's just beautiful. I am looking at it thinking I could do with a bit more colour up there. So we could actually just add a little bit more of the lollipop to the top edge. Another spritz of water. And of course I've done the wrong side because you're looking at it in reverse. So let's just add a bit more over this side. Okay. Nice and smushy, and this time I'll let it run up near the top of the flower, and we're going to flip it over and get it up near the top of those petals. And we've got some on our backing card, but you know what? Smushy backgrounds doesn't matter at all. If you do something like that, the easiest way to fix it is to just come in and add a few more bits around. And we'll do that on a bottom corner and make it look like it was all part of the deal. I'm just getting some on the edge of the block so we get a few little sort of odd marks. And so that looks like it was all part of the design to start with. So that's the joy of smushy stuff. Doesn't have to be perfect. That's the whole idea. It's smushy. See why I like smushy? Okay, so that's our basic stamping done and our basic colouring. I will now get rid of all this wet pad out of here. Give this a bit of a dry as well. Just as well as to dry it, just to make sure that I haven't got any odd bits of shimmer dust anywhere, because those colours are so vibrant, it will go everywhere. Now, I do have one that I prepared a bit earlier because I want to do the embossing. I actually want to make sure it was really dry. So we'll get this one and go over it with our anti-static pad. And now I've got to decide, do I want to stamp the whole stamp or do I want to stamp just the flower part? Because I can ink up just this part, or I can let the stem be embossed over the top of those bits. And I can do it one way on a card one time, and I can do it the other way another time. It's one of those things where there's no hard and fast rules. If I was to ink up just the rosebud part, so let's line it up with our outline image, our little grey image that we put in there. Let's line our stamp up with that. Just shifting it around until I can see that I'm over those grey lines. So then if I wanted to just stamp the flower, I would ink with my Versamark, and I'm just going to make sure I've got my scrap paper and my embossing powder standing by ready before we start Versamarking. Okay, so with my Versamark, I could just ink the flower, or even just the flower and those leaves, and then use my cloth just to wipe out that little bit so that you don't get that inked as well. But I'm actually going to try doing the whole flower and see how it comes out over the collage. So this is certainly the easier way, but it doesn't mean that you can't just ink the flower if you want to. Particularly if part of your collage is a few more flowers coming down or something like that, you especially wouldn't want the stem in there. Okay, let's rest it over, making sure it looks like it's still covering all those grey lines. Reckon we're good. Press down, cross your fingers. So I don't mind where it is on the smushy colour, but I really don't want to see the grey initial outline that we put there. Okay, let's pop it into our black embossing powder and see what we've got. Can you tell I'm happy already? I think having the black embossing down there is going to really put the other colours into the background, the other images into the background, and make them look very collagey. Now I'll just come in with my brush and just check that I don't have grains. Even though I used the anti-static pad, the card may have still been a little bit damp from me creating it. But I'm pretty happy there. Okay, let's pop our black powder back in our jar. It's a good habit to get into so that you don't one day turn your heat gun on while you've got your embossing powder open. Just a good habit to get into. Let's give our stamp a clean and put our precision press to one side. And do some heating and see what we've got. Okay. Because the card has had water on it, it may need a little bit of a heat from behind as well, just to stop it curling. And I'm just watching for it to change. There it goes. Absolutely beautiful. So our beading and our mandala border are now in behind that beautiful rose, just creating our collage pattern. Now the last thing to add to this, I've picked some glitter and some liquid pearls colours just to pick out some of our beading. And I might also come in with a shimmer pen and add, I know the shimmer dusts have got shine in them, but let's pick out some of the bits of these petals and just add a bit more shine in there. Just give it that little bit extra sheen and sparkle. Now the colours I've chosen, I've gone with the Dazzle, which is like a fluorescent pink. I didn't go with the fluorescent orange, I felt it a little bit too bright, so I've chosen Orange Blossom as well, which looks a little bit dull in the jar, but it actually comes out a really good colour. So let's pop some of these on and then we'll pop some glitter in there. I'm just deciding whether to do pearls first or glitter first. You can see it's subtle, but it's a really good orange colour. So anywhere there's a little bead there, we could even pick out a few spots on our mandala border there, which I'm trying to remember what Siobhan, who designed it, told me it was called. Unlome, I think. There's actually a meaning to the various swirls, which makes me realise now that I'm going to have to find that out and pop up a comment, aren't I, to check what the word actually is and what it means. Okay, coming in with the Dazzle pearls. So this is the bright pink. Just looking for wherever I can pop in some little dots with this one. Just really adds to it, just to give it that extra texture. It also, like there, I found I hadn't brought the gems part of the stamp up quite high enough, so I can just fill it in with a little bit of pearl. Let's pop a few bits in here. And in amongst our orange ones there. And now the glitter. Now I've chosen Glisten because it's got quite a bit of different colours in it. I'm going to pick up these bigger gems with some nice sparkle. And I did test this one out on a scrap paper before I started, and it's still saying, I gave you a bit, what do you expect? Do you expect me to work all the time? It's a really good colour, but it just is one of the ones that blocks up the most. Pardon me. Better. Let's get some good glitter on those bigger gems. Something that's going to make it take a little while to dry. And we'll bring some little bits of it in around here. I was going to say that's probably enough, but then I decided let's add a few more little bits in amongst all our other gems. Just cause you can. And something like this, you know, can it be too sparkly? That's pretty nice. Now if you wanted to, you could also then go around the flower with some more glitter or something, or we can just leave it like that. I think I'm actually quite happy with that, just the way it is. So just bringing a little bit of extra shine around the flower, but adding the glitter and the pearls to our collage part. So I hope you like that one. I'm just going to bring it forward onto the black tablecloth so Matthew can get a nice shot of it without lots of other colours all around. I love that. I think it's wonderful to be able to play around with your different stamps and see what designs you can actually put together and what collage elements you can build up with stamps that you may already have. Or what other eclectic stamps you go, oh, I need that one for my collection. So I hope you're inspired by this one, not only to try this relaxed style of watercolouring and applying colour, but also inspired to have a look at the stamps that you've got, or maybe some eclectic stamps that you might need, to be able to use part of those stamps and make up different collage looks. So have a look at your collection, see what you can do. Love to see what you managed to create, and we'll see you soon for another Crafting with Cathy.